It is now my pleasure to welcome Professors Wendy Lower, who's our director of the Mgrublian Center for Human Rights, and the John K. Roth Professor of History, as well as George R. Roberts Fellow. And of course, Professor John Roth himself, our Edward J. Sexton Professor Emeritus of Philosophy, for a discussion regarding Holocaust Remembrance, antisemitism, and the future of American democracy. We are celebrating this year the 20 years anniversary of the Mgrublian Center for Human Rights. For those of you that have been with the Mgrublian Center for 20 years, you will know that it started by John Roth as the Center for the Study of the Holocaust, Genocide, and Human Rights, something that was very important to me during my CMC years as well. Today, we will be talking about Holocaust history, doing good in 2024. I turn it over to John and Wendy. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you, Evan, for those kind words of introduction, and thanks to everyone who's Zooming today. And this is a special observance of International Holocaust Remembrance Day. And as we begin our observance, I want to remind you that Adolf Hitler despised democracy, taking it to be a deceitful, subversive outlook spread by Jews. On July 14th, 1933, just 6 months after he came to power, Hitler celebrated the law against the founding of new parties, which established the Nazi Party as the only political party in Germany. By then, the civil liberties of German Jews, including the right to vote, were on their way to extinction, destroyed by the Nazis' racial antisemitism, which culminated in mass shootings and gas chamber murders intended to destroy the European Jews. When democracy dies, costs are too much to bear. The Holocaust is a warning. That has been said before, but now in 2024, the Holocaust warning resounds with urgency. It does so because the Holocaust did not erupt out of the blue, nor was it fated to happen. Human decisions and policies in the 1930s led to that catastrophe. Destructive versions of them are widespread today. In our times, the Holocaust warns against autocracy and obedience to it. The Holocaust cries, beware of big, repeated lies, conspiracy theories, disrespect for evidence and truth, and disregard for language that inflames division and violence. If such alarms are ignored, the world is worse for it. Absent lies and liars, especially big lies and liars with authoritarian power, the Holocaust would not have happened. Autocratic Nazi power, moreover, depended on and received willingly compliance and complicity from leaders in every sector of German life: education, law, politics, medicine, business, media, sports, and religion. The Nazis' lethally racist antisemitism depended on falsehoods, on lies about Jews. Nazi power arose because Hitler and his followers bogusly, repeatedly insisted that Germany's defeat in World War I resulted from a stab-in-the-back conspiracy. Nazi propaganda overrode contrary evidence, calling it fake news, and Hitler's vows to destroy the Jews who were slandered as fatal viruses in the body politic show how malignant language becomes deadly. So it was that almost 80 years ago, toward the end of February 1944, a 24-year-old Jewish chemist named Primo Levi began the dehumanizing 4-day cattle car railroad journey that deported him from his native Italy to Auschwitz. Levy never forgot the deportation's deliberate, gratuitous malice, as he wrote. And the Holocaust cruelty was the point, because it made enforcing of slave labor and killing easier for the Nazi perpetrators of genocide against the European Jews. About a year later, Levy began another journey after the liberation. That commonly used word is too optimistic. Liberation on January 27th, 1945. It led to his becoming a writer with unsurpassed insight about the Holocaust. A key source of his insight was Lorenzo Perrone, the person Levy credited with saving his life. Not a Jew, but an Italian civilian, Lorenzo, a skilled bricklayer, was conscripted to help build an industrial plant that the Germans were constructing near Auschwitz. After meeting Levy as they labored at the construction site in late June of 1944, Lorenzo decided to help his fellow Italian. For months and at significant risk, Lorenzo got Levy extra food, which was the physical difference between life and death. I believe that I owe it to Lorenzo if I am alive today, Levy would write, underscoring that Lorenzo's help meant much more than food alone, but also sustained him. Was Lorenzo constantly reminded me, said Levy, constantly reminded me by his presence, by his natural and plain manner of being good, that a just world still existed outside ours, something and someone still pure and whole, not corrupt, not savage, unconnected to hatred and fear. Something difficult to define, said Levy, a remote possibility of good, but for which it was worth surviving. When liberation came, Levy lost track of Lorenzo. They reconnected in Italy after the war, but soon Lorenzo died. Levy's recollections of him are memorable. Lorenzo was not religious, Levy said. He didn't know the gospel, but instinctively he tried to rescue people, not for pride, not for glory, but out of a good heart and for human comprehension. He asked me once in very laconic words, said Levy, why are we in the world if not to help each other? At one of their post-war meetings, Levy learned that he was not the only Auschwitz prisoner whom Lorenzo had helped, but Levy's friend had rarely told that story. In Lorenzo's view, wrote Levy, we are in the world to do good, not to boast of it. Primo Levi never forgot Lorenzo and the dignity of his life that his life-saving gifts restored. Lorenzo despised hatred and fear, so did Levy. Resisting cruelty and corruption, savagery and antisemitism, they both defended justice. But what about Lorenzo's telling Levy that we are in the world to do good? Was Lorenzo naive? Was he gullible, even stupid? Cruelty and corruption, hatred and fear, antisemitism and injustice remain stubbornly resurgent. On October 7th, 2023, for example, decades after Lorenzo saved Primo Levi, anti-Semitic Hamas militants inflicted traumatizing atrocities on Israel, including sexualized violence, the worst attack against Jews since the Holocaust. The Hamas carnage provoked a response from Benjamin Netanyahu's government so devastating that Gaza, territory of about 139 square miles, has become the site of an immense Palestinian humanitarian crisis that has no end in sight. International Holocaust Remembrance Day in 2024 finds humankind in a world of hurt. It includes endangered democracy, our own United States. If our American political health isn't good, we are not in the best position to help others, including Palestinians, Israelis, and Ukrainians who need support. If we are, as Lorenzo said, in the world to do good, what does doing good to save endangered democracy most fundamentally require of us Americans? Not only the powerful and influential, but citizens of all kinds in 2024 and beyond. My friend Jill Cody produces and hosts Be Bold America, an interview program that airs on KSQD, community radio station serving California's Central Coast. When she interviewed me about a book called Warnings, The Holocaust, Ukraine, and Endangered American Democracy, she concluded by asking 3 questions. What should we keep doing? What should we stop doing? What should we start doing? Those good questions focus some of what we Americans need to do if we follow Lorenzo's example and challenge about doing good in our world of hurt. What should we keep doing? Be patriotic. That's one important answer. Being patriotic differs from being nationalistic. A nationalist says, my country right or wrong, or my nation's might makes right. By contrast, as the historian Timothy Snyder says, a patriot wants the nation to live up to its ideals, which means asking us to be our best selves. As I've thought about that idea, it seems to me that our best selves resist decisions and policies like those that led to the Holocaust, or genocidal war in Ukraine, or Hamas atrocities, or humanitarian crises in Gaza. Our best selves do not tolerate conspiracy to overturn fair and free elections in the United States. Our best selves reject antisemitism and racism. They oppose hypocrisy and autocracy. Our best selves hold lying leaders accountable. They bring tyrants to justice. Our best selves neither take human rights away nor allow one right, arms bearing, for example, to run roughshod over others. Instead, our best selves shield rights, wrestle with their complex relationships, and expand them. Our best selves are kind, not cruel. They stand with the nearly 90 naturalist Jane Goodall, who reminds us that without hope, all is lost. Hope is a crucial survival trait that has sustained our species, she says, from the time of our Stone Age ancestors. Please believe, she writes, that against all odds, we can win out, because if you don't believe that, you will lose hope, sink into apathy and despair, and do nothing. Our best selves do not do that. They hope instead, understanding that hope, as Jane Goodall says, requires action, engagement. Our best selves never give up trying to be our best. What should we stop doing? We should stop lying Stop aiding and abetting liars and instead respect evidence and defend truth. Tyranny, authoritarianism, hostility to democracy, from Hitler to Putin and beyond, those perversions depend on lying, on disrespecting truth, on willful failure to seek and respect it. If we Americans are in the world to do good for our democracy, nothing, I think, is more important than seeking and respecting truth, even when, indeed especially when, it questions our predispositions, shows our beliefs to be unjustified. Such commitment requires believing in truth, affirming that it exists, which is crucial to defend what has been coming to be called the liar's dividend. The advantage that accrues when disinformation is allowed to blur beyond recognition the difference between what is true and what is not. That work requires taking facts seriously. Doing so may be hard and contrary to our wishes, but we do it all the time. Unless we are blind and stupid, we have no other choice because facts are stubborn. They can be suppressed or denied, but they do not go away. And democracy's survival depends on fidelity to them. As Timothy Snyder again wisely says in his essential guidebook called On Tyranny, 20 Lessons from the 20th Century, to abandon facts is to abandon freedom. If nothing is true, Snyder writes, then no one can criticize power because there is no basis upon which to do so. Snyder tells how truth dies. Hostility to verifiable reality lets inventions and lies become facts. Then blunt and endless repetition of those inventions and lies, he says, makes the fictional plausible and the criminal desirable. Snyder's warning is that post-truth is pre-fascism. Continues this way. Fascists despise the small truths of daily existence, loved slogans that resonated like a new religion, and preferred creative myths to history or journalism. They used new media, which at the time was radio, to create a drumbeat of propaganda. And now, as then, many people, says Snyder, confused faith in a hugely flawed leader with truth about the world we all share. If we Americans are in the world to do good for our democracy, we must stop accepting that we live in a post-truth culture where nothing is true, might makes right, and anything goes. What should we start doing? Take nothing good for granted. Doing good depends on being alert to danger that way. So quickly and in such devastating ways, Hitler's Holocaust, Putin's war in Ukraine, and seemingly endless, relentless corruption in our own United States have swept away so much that is right and just, good and true. Doing good in our times requires us Americans to stand with Primo Levi's life-saving friend Lorenzo, to be our best selves as patriots who believe in truth and defend democracy as courageously as we can. Being as courageous as we can includes vigilance against failures of imagination that say losing democracy doesn't matter very much. Being as courageous as we must means rejecting denialism that claims it wouldn't be so bad if an authoritarian, anti-democratic strongman led our country. Lorenzo Perón and Primo Levi warn us Americans that such thinking and acting are dangerous nonsense. None of us can do everything needed to protect and preserve democracy and to move toward true and just peace. But we should not overlook the fact that even small deeds and modest actions are significant. Each and every one of us can do something to protect democracy and create justice. Our presence at this Claremont McKenna College conversation bears witness to that. So do the votes that we will cast this year. Somewhere, the following words were found on a wall. I believe in the sun even when it's not shining. I believe in love even when I feel it not. I believe in God even when he is silent. No one knows who wrote those words. No one is certain about the precise location of the wall where they were found. But stories from the Holocaust suggest that those words came from a Jew, a child, a woman, and who put them on a hiding place wall in Cologne, Germany. Other versions of the story put the words on the wall of a ghetto, concentration camp, or killing center. Wherever the wall's Holocaust location may have been, its Jewish inscription expressed resistance against Nazi tyranny. Outlasting their author's living, the words still inspire defiance against powers that rob people of hope and joy. What do we Americans believe in when democracy may die in darkness? What do we believe in when we don't feel that democracy at its best has much of a future? What do we believe in when justice seems abandoned, violence endless, when the noise of lies and liars washes evidence and silences truth? We can and must do more than write on walls. We have to heed Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall, who broke American walls of racism and wrote, "Where you see wrong or inequality or injustice, speak out, because this is your country. This is your democracy. Make it, protect it, pass it on." Marshall's counsel is good counsel for International Holocaust Remembrance Day. It enjoins vital work that complements the resistance written decades ago on a Holocaust wall. Hard as a rock, it's unending work that must be done, lest injustice, despair, carnage, and death win victories they do not deserve.
Thank you, John. As I was listening to your comments and reading them, and you shared them with me, and I also want to inform the audience here that in January 2022, Professor Roth was the keynote speaker for International Holocaust Remembrance Day for the United Nations. And there's also a recording of that online that you can enjoy. And I'm so glad that you shared your sentiments at this time. A lot has happened since you gave that speech at the UN. And I appreciate your attention to the fragility of democracy. This is one of the cornerstones of our National Museum in Washington, D.C., the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum. Its 20th anniversary, the director, who was accompanied by Elie Wiesel at the time at a dinner I attended, spoke very urgently about and forcefully about the fragility of democracy, the nature of hate, and the consequences of indifference as these universal lessons of the Holocaust. And somehow I feel like we've lost that idea of the universality, not to take the Jewish history out of it and the European history out of it and the specificity of German history out of it, but what this means for all of us. And how far are we all willing to go as far as what we take for granted in our democracy? And the fragility of hope. Emily Dickinson tells us hope is a thing with feathers. So we have something that is so fragile and yet so vital to our future. When Hitler was appointed chancellor, within a month, he took advantage of the bombing of the Reichstag, and this resulted in the so-called Reichstag fire decree, which was invoked after January 6th by General Mark Milley, who saw the Nazi imagery in the crowd, as he said, "These guys look like the brown shirts to me. This looks like a Reichstag moment." At a time when Trump was also saying that Hitler did good things. And why couldn't American generals act like German generals? I think we have to take all of this extremely seriously. How much are we willing to give up? Because within a month with the Reichstag fire decree, the suspension of civil liberties means the giving up of the freedom of speech, the freedom of the press, the freedom of privacy, the freedom of assembly, and of course, the freedom of your body, your bodily integrity. We've already seen that happen. When the Reichstag fire decree was issued, the Supreme Court justices in Germany at that time just backed down. They said it was not their concern. They didn't need to weigh in on that. So there's a lot of echoes of this past that we have to take very seriously. On January 25th, today, the camp Stutthof in Nazi-annexed Poland was not liberated, but the prisoners were forced out into a death march, 50,000 of them, headed north to the Baltic Sea, the freezing Baltic Sea. It's January, pushed onto barges and forced to transport, and among them were Polish priests, Polish resistance fighters, obviously Jewish prisoners, and to try to make their way through strafing, through bombing campaigns at the end of the war. And not all of them made it. In fact, half of them did not make it. There's one person I know who's still alive today who did make it, George Schwab in New York City right now. And I'm thinking about him today because, like the story that John shared with us, when he was freezing as a young boy on that barge, he survived. He doesn't have a clear memory of the end because someone carried him to the shore while the Nazis, while the SS were shooting bullets at the prisoners. So this is obviously something we want to avoid. There's an escalation to this history that historians have charted out. And obviously we don't want to see a repeat of this. So we need to stand for good and heed what Professor Roth is telling us. Many of you experienced Professor Roth as a teacher here at CMC, and I'm really delighted that many of you are on this call. He's famous for many things, including founding the Mgrublian Center, what was what I still call kind of the Roth Center too. He used to teach a course called The American Dream. And I wanted to ask you today, because I can imagine that there were some of your former students who took that course, if you want to comment on that course in light of today and your reevaluation of what's going on in America and your deep study of the Holocaust. You have to unmute, John. Unmute, huh?
I followed Evan's instructions and muted myself. Students, I'm sure, were hoping that could happen frequently back in the day. But for me, there was always a close connection between thinking about the American dream, about American democracy, and the Holocaust, when my career developed in a way that led those two topics to converge. And it would very often be the case that in the same semester, I would be reading with students Federalist 10 or Federalist 51. And later in the day, I'd be reading a text by Primo Levi or Elie Wiesel. And it all came together in a way that Wendy alluded to a moment ago. The existence of the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum on the Mall in Washington, D.C. is where these things come together for us. I had a fellowship year at the museum about 20 years ago, and I was always impressed as I entered that building, which many of you have been in, to read the inscriptions on the walls, which were by, presidents and, American leaders of one kind or another. And nearly all of the quotations that were selected on the walls of the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. were about the necessity to protect and respect democracy. Because the presence of that museum right in the heart of our nation's capital, it sits there to remind us Americans that Nazi Germany and the Holocaust are the antithesis of everything the United States stands for when it and its citizens are at our best. And so Wendy, in her kind of brilliant 60-second recapitulation of German history after Hitler came to power, just illustrates that for us. And her list of all the things that happened under Hitler in the early years before Auschwitz existed, but things that were the prelude to that destructive place. These are all things that are, in one way or another, on our plate today to be concerned about, things to avoid. I think the thing that I feel more and more strongly about is that when democracy is endangered, when it dies in darkness, as that masthead statement from the Washington Post says, bad things happen. It doesn't mean that genocide happens necessarily, or that groups of people are targeted for destruction, but bad things happen. And that's why in the last of my comments, I said we have to avoid failures of imagination that sort of say, well, things wouldn't be so bad if. We have to avoid a kind of denialism that suggests that it would just really be okay. Our lives wouldn't change that much if we had an authoritarian strongman leading our country. I think that that's a bet I don't want to take, and I'm guessing that most of you, if not all of you on this Zoom call today would agree with that.
So appreciate your inspiring words. We all need some Roth therapy, and I think this year maybe more than ever, because these are obviously very, very trying times, difficult times. They were already difficult, right, coming out of the pandemic, and then the war in Ukraine, and then the Hamas attack. And what happens is these crises, they wear you down. It's exhausting. And that's part of the struggle as far as just staying alert and trying to be firm as far as the things that you're not willing to give up, right? We may have to meet again, just as far as staying focused and working together and trying to stand for good, as Professor Roth has emphasized today. This is a shorter program, and I think we've got so many people here on the line, and there's quite a bit of activity in the chat. I'd like to open it up earlier. I see Lucy Kapner's here, and Lucy, who is my researcher, she actually, quick memory, when she was doing some work for me, John, one time she said, "Hey, I just found this great quote from an essay. It was a rather obscure essay that you had published on teaching the Holocaust that she uncovered. And you said, 'We remember the Holocaust to hold ourselves accountable.'" And I keep that on my desk and I quote that often. But I'd love to hear from some folks here in the audience. We're very glad that you could join us today. And I know you feel strongly about these issues as well.
Thank you, Wendy, and thank you, John. If anyone would like to address Wendy or John directly, in the reactions tab at the bottom, you can click on reactions. It's a smiley face, the plus sign, and on that it says raise hand. If you click that, there's a little hand that'll go up and you'll come to the first part of the screen here, just like what Kingsley did. And that's the easiest way for us to call on you next. What you can also do is put something in the chat. You can put it directly to me privately, or you can say it publicly, and we'll get to that comment or question as well. So we'll start with Kingsley, who raised his hand first.
Thank you, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
As I mentioned in my introduction in the chat, I've spent the past 30 years studying the Holocaust, and it has stained my soul. I did it because I was being abused in my professional life as a civil engineer working for the city of San Francisco by a very bad supervisor. And without getting into the details of that, I knew about the Holocaust because my dad liberated Buchenwald on its second day, fighting under Patton for America. And I wanted to find out how people who were really hurt, how did they get through it? So I started studying the Holocaust and I found out. But one of the things that I learned from it is the Hitler playbook, which is basically just lie. And when someone points out some evidence you've lied, double down like someone else we know, lie some more. It's very sad that we're in this situation in this country right now, going down the same path. One of the things that will go against lying is truth. Around 1800, a new philosophy started to take off in our peer countries and in the United States. That philosophy is called science. It gave us the Industrial Revolution, which improved the standard of living of humanity by 100 times. It was only able to do this by finding the truth. We would not have a vacuum cleaner or a computer or this television or this, that, and the other thing if science had not found the truth. And it's found it all over the place. One area it found the truth in was evolution, which most people denied. They couldn't see that their parents were descended from chimpanzees, but it was the truth. This story of the founding of the planet, of us, is a direct contradiction to Genesis. It shows that Genesis is a lie, and whoever wrote Genesis lied about their status as being a prophet. This eventually goes to the idea of anti-Semitism. If you look deep into the Holocaust, it's based on anti-Semitism. Hitler himself lied all over the place concerning what the Jews were, as being parasites or being controlling of the international monetary system and that kind of thing. But his basis of it goes right down into Christianity, to the anti-Semitism of Christianity. And that's the only way to stop it, is to get down to that root, pull it out, and kill it. And that's going to be hard to do. People are going to have to start realizing that scripture contains lies. Anyway, this Professor Roth, masterful job you've done. Masterful. And we need to learn some important lessons here for humanity's sake. Thank you.
John or Wendy, any response?
John, go ahead. I think that was directed at you.
Yeah, Kingsley, I applaud much of what you say, but I want to push back just a little bit. One of my main motivations for teaching and studying about the Holocaust has been because I'm a Christian. And my understanding of my own tradition is, as you say, that it's a tradition that has contributed horrendously to anti-Semitism and even to the Holocaust. And much of my work and teaching has been to push back against that. But I just want to mention that part of the antidote to anti-Semitism is to heed the teachings of the Hebrew prophets, Amos and Micah and Hosea, Jeremiah, and to try, if it's your cup of tea, to try to follow in the path of Jesus. So religion is all mixed up. Wherever there's genocide, religion is going to be in the neighborhood somewhere. And religion is something that has to be criticized from religious points of view. And if it can be criticized effectively from those points of view, then it can become an ally to resist anti-Semitism and to defend justice and truth. So I'm in wholehearted agreement with you, but I come at it from a slightly different perspective than the one that you articulated that seemed to be quite negative about religion. There's a good case for being negative about religion, but that's not the whole story, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, John. Ariel, class of 13.
Thank you. Thank you guys for this. My grandparents are all Holocaust survivors, so this is a very important topic and personal topic as well. I don't know who to direct this to, so whichever one of you wants to answer this. There's obviously been an increase in anti-Semitic incidents on college campuses the last several months. And I'm curious if you see that is, I mean, you're talking about federal politics, you're talking about Trump, I guess without saying Trump, but I'm curious if you see what's going on in college campuses as indicative of something larger, if not, if you see it as potentially isolated from, you know, political or lawmakers. Just curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Thank you, Ariel. Yes, absolutely. We have an increase of phenomenal increase in incidents nationwide. This last year, the ADL reported about 33 incidents, and now we have about 400. And of course, the violent nature of them is also increasing. The various forms of vandalism, of boycotts. So again, in the history of anti-Semitism, anti-Judaism, because it takes on many different forms, these are manifesting themselves in all different scenes. And college campuses are a magnet for this. We don't have much in the way of the town center in American life. College campuses are community centers, but they're also closed spaces of academic learning. And sometimes, sometimes these events are happening, from the outside, sometimes they're happening from within, right? But they become these sites of these kinds of demonstrations that kind of threaten our environment. Here at CMC and the 5 colleges, it's been an interesting, I would say it's not as radical and as frightening as what we've seen on other campuses. Although we have had documented demonstrations of vandalism. We've had protests, using the language of Hamas as far as calling for the end of Israel. We've also had instances of Islamophobia. But this history of anti-Semitism, it and the way it appears runs so deep, and we're talking about continuities today and the fear of continuities, and this is clearly one of the strongest, or as one author said, the longest hatred. So my job, in fact, today I'm teaching my seminar this afternoon on researching the Holocaust, which has enrolled more students this year than I've had in several years, is to help both Jewish and non-Jewish students understand what anti-Semitism is, what does it look like, how do we define it, what do we do about it when we see it. One of my concerns among many is that Jewish students who are not only subjected to it feel the burden to not only kind of receive it, but also be the ambassadors on campuses to educate about their history, to educate about the Holocaust. So again, I have got more students coming in my class because they're trying to figure out, what is this history? Where do I fit into it? Why are these echoes coming back? Why is the Holocaust being invoked time and again? So that's just kind of a general observations, but we're definitely aware of this. In fact, before the Hamas attack, I met with the Dean of Students. I've met with some people on this call. We spoke about this last spring. I've been seeing this percolating with deep concern and trying to prepare for any kinds of threats to the students here and to their safety is number one.
I want to comment just briefly on the good point that question raised, and it goes back to what I said in my prepared remarks. We can't take good things for granted with regard to the culture and quality of life on our campuses. We have to work at it to make these places what they ought to be. And as I think especially about CMC, I want CMC to be its best self. Every morning I begin my workday by going to the CMC website. I haven't lived in Claremont for quite a few years now, but I feel deeply connected to the college, and I want it to be at its best. And when I think to myself, what is CMC when it's at its best? It's a place where inquiry is taken seriously. I would say, without sounding corny, it's a place where people try to find out what's true and what isn't. And it was always a place at its best where people respected one another and cared for one another. And I think we can't take that for granted, but we have to keep working, just as we have to keep working to support democracy. We have to keep working to make CMC the place that it should be and can be when it's at its best. I have a friend, Lenny Grob, who was a co-author of mine, and he likes to say that democracy is more a verb than a noun. And we ought to think of CMC that way, I think. CMC is not so much just a place or an institution or a college. It's a set of activities. It's a set of commitments. It's a set of relationships. And these are ongoing, and sometimes they get off the rails, but they can be put back on again. And at the very core of it all is the commitment to see one another as human beings, as brothers and sisters, and to support each other in our pursuit of not just knowledge and truth, but I would say of wisdom, of deep down understanding that seeks to promote what is right and good and just. Tim Safford had a question in the chat that I saw, and Tim's an old-time friend. And his question says, what are some of the dangerous words that I'm hearing? He's picking up on the Timothy Snyder book on tyranny. And the two of the dangerous words that I hear are futility and cynicism. Those are dangerous words because they are the opposite of CMC at its best, where there were people over and over again who thought that there was no problem that couldn't be solved if people like the ones at CMC put their hearts and minds and souls behind the solution of it. So I'm a big opponent of futility and cynicism. I'm not a starry-eyed optimist. I'm like Albert Camus and his character Sisyphus. I try to be like that. That I push that rock up the hill, knowing it's likely to come rolling back down, but you can't afford to stop pushing it back up. And I think Holocaust Remembrance Day is a good day to think about Sisyphus and his rock and the world of hurt we're in and the refusal to accept it and the determination to resist it. I think when CMC is at its best, that is the kind of disposition that it cultivates.
Thanks, John. We had a question come in from a student of yours 52 years ago. He saw a report that as many as 40% of people under 30 in the US are unaware of the Holocaust. What can be done to correct this failure in the US education system?
Well, I hope Wendy will chime in because both of us have spent our careers teaching about the Holocaust. Wendy and I participated in a book project a few years ago called Advancing Holocaust Studies, I think was the title of it. And one of the themes in that book was about failure. That for all the effort and energy and building of museums and memorials and scholarship and all the rest, there has been a kind of failure when it comes to Holocaust education. And here's one of the reasons why. Many of us, people of my generation, and I think of Wendy's too, held the belief for a while that if we could just teach people about the Holocaust, if we could have a robust Holocaust education program in our schools and colleges and universities, antisemitism might decline, it might even go away. And we now know that that assumption was utterly naive, and that idea failed. So now the question becomes, what do you do with your failure? I learned one thing very important. I learned many things very important, but one thing in particular always stuck with me from Elie Wiesel, who said that despair is not the end, it's the beginning. As long as you're alive and have breath and energy, it's the beginning, because you have to figure out what to do with it. So failure is like that too. What do you do with your failure? And I think for me, and I think Wendy's a good example of this too, you say, okay, I can't any longer think that teaching about the Holocaust, that education about the Holocaust is going to, save the world or, transform things in the way that I wish they could be transformed. But I can't stop doing this. I have to keep focusing on doing this. I have to rally support for it, because to fail further is too big a price to pay. So we celebrate the occasion of remembering the Holocaust as we're doing now. The fact that we're doing this is one of those small deeds that I alluded to that can make a difference. And how does it make a difference? It makes a difference, I believe this firmly, it makes a difference in the lives of individuals. And if individuals are changed and motivated in a particular way, this is good CMC stuff, isn't it? We think that can make a difference in the world. So I guess I would say that I pursue Holocaust education and research and writing because I'm a CMC person. This would be one of my answers. And as a CMC person, I believe that the individual can make a difference.
Thank you, John.
I hope that's one of the things you remember from being at CMC.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I wanted to add to that, we have to value these, as well, Hilbert would say, these incremental gains. And just because it seems like, it's not working immediately and that the, entire generations haven't been, converted, or we don't see a measurable decrease in anti-Semitism, and suddenly we've entered into some sort of utopian mode after, you know, a couple of generations of Holocaust education. That's naive, but doesn't mean that the effort is not worthwhile, and the changing of these individuals, and the fact that we're in this call together. And I was, you know, working with the state of South Carolina actually on doing a program with them on Monday on Holocaust literature, and the kinds of networks and infrastructure that exists. There's a lot of potential there. And I also feel like if we admit defeat in that way, or pure failure, I mean, I agree, despair is a starting point, then we're also playing into this kind of sentiment, this cynical sentiment that's totally contrary to our mission. And that is that somehow intellectual centers and academic centers and higher education is part of the problem. And I don't believe that. When we see the demographics of voting, education absolutely matters. And what we're doing matters. And our students are going to be, you know, it's very concentrated here. They are going into leadership positions. And I feel much better knowing that they're going to go into the world learning this history than anything else. And what can we do, right? Each day you say, what can I do as an individual?
Big thanks to all of you and to our speakers. I'm proud of all of you for being here. Thank you for your continued support. And of course, I'm very proud of everything Claremont McKenna College is doing in this space as well. Congratulations to the Mgrublian Center for 20 years, and to Wendy and John and all the board members on for helping keep this a reality at CMC. Feel free to unmute, say hello, say goodbye. We'll see you all next time.